Welcome to Band Talk with Charlie Mangini and friends. The only podcast where it's okay to talk in band. On this podcast, you will be able to hear conversations with some of the greatest names in wind band conducting, composing, and arranging. We'll also visit with great college, high school, middle school, and elementary band directors to get their thoughts on various aspects of being a band director. We'll have regular check-ins with instrument specialists, music dealers, and instrument repair professionals. And if that's not enough, we'll even have regular conversations with Dr. Tim, who will help keep us motivated. That's Band Talk with Charlie Mangini and friends. And now, here's Charlie.
Welcome to Band Talk with Charlie Mangini and friends. And today I am presenting my 64th podcast and number 5 in season 3. I am delighted that you are joining me for a wonderful conversation with retired Colonel Thomas Palmatier, whose career spanned more than 37 years in the United States military, including the opportunity to conduct both the United States Army Field Band and Pershing's own, the United States Army Band. Though retired from his military life, I can assure you that Colonel Palmatier is still very active as a guest conductor, clinician, and most recently named as editor of School Band and Orchestra magazine. Colonel Palmatier is a down-to-earth guy, and his story is one that I know you're going to really enjoy. I'll be back with this very special conversation right after this word from one of my sponsors, Hal Leonard, publisher of the Essential Elements Method for Band.
Today's podcast is made possible through the support of Hal Leonard, publisher of the Essential Elements Method for Band and the Essential Elements interactive website that is free for Essential Elements users. Essential Elements Interactive, or EEI, is a state-of-the-art, cloud-based support program that is constantly evolving to provide you and your students with more information and resources to help them learn and have fun while doing so. To learn more about EEI, visit EssentialElementsInteractive.com.
Well, I can't remember the exact time and place that I met our next guest, but I do remember that every time I have met him, he has been a gentleman's gentleman and always engaging in conversation and full of good ideas. And it's just a real pleasure to welcome to the podcast, I would say, retired Colonel Thomas Palmatier. Is that correct, Colonel?
That's correct, yeah. But I go by Tom these days.
So you're a civilian these days and you're going by Tom.
Well, you know, I'm very proud of having served our nation in uniform, but you know, that was then, and this is now, and so you know, I could conduct a community band, and that was the first thing I said to him. I said, "My name's Tom, and I'm a band kid."
Well, that's great. Well, I will try not to slip into old habits, but I will tell you a quick story. When Dr. Bejan was alive.
Oh, yeah.
And he used to come to Vandercook and we taught classes together. And one night we're going to dinner together and he turned to me and he goes, "Would you call me Harry?" And I said, "I'll do my best, Dr. Bejan."
Yeah.
my father beat it into me. So
Yeah.
I'll do my best, Tom. Okay.
Yep.
Great. Well, thanks for joining me. And you've just turned the page on your career. And now you've even taken another new challenge in your life as the editor of School Band and Orchestra magazine. And I want to make sure we spend some time to talk about that. But first, you had an incredible career. So take us back to the young Tom Palmatier. Where did you grow up and when did music first become a part of your life?
Well, I grew up in upstate New York, just between Albany and Saratoga. And I was really, really lucky in that our school district had a great arts program. And so instrumental music started in 4th grade. And as you know, over the years, many schools are now starting in 6th grade. And those kids it's just too late, I think, but so 4th grade was a a great time to start. And I started playing. I had a little no-name cornet, and was taking cornet lessons and from the band director, and playing in the beginning band. And my mother was a good pianist. My father had never studied music, but he had a beautiful singing voice. So there was always music in the home, but they weren't certainly professional musicians or anything like that, but they valued it. And if I showed an interest in taking lessons or something, they did their very best. We were not wealthy, but they made sure that I got a chance to experience those things. But mostly I had great teachers, really, really fine teachers, all the way from fourth grade up through senior high. So just played in band, and later on orchestra and chorus and anything I could get my hands on in school. So it just there was no great master plan. It just kind of snuck in, you're a band kid, and then you become an orchestra kid, and then a chorus kid, and all of a sudden you find yourself going to school to study music.
So what was any recollections from your high school band experiences? The literature you played, the experiences you had, concerts, those kind of things?
Well, I think one of the first memorable things, and it touches to one of the important people in my life, was that my fifth grade band director was Tony Maiello.
Oh my.
And that was his first year teaching right out of Ithaca. And he was a student of Willard Musser. And I never met Willard Musser, but I heard that Willard Musser could make Dr. Ravelli cry. He was a pretty tough guy. And so Tony was very, very high energy, high demands as that first year teacher. And I think that started the spark, because, I didn't understand everything that he was doing, but I saw this guy who was clearly so into what he was doing, so excited, so dedicated, so just on fire with what he was doing. It kind of said, well, I'd like to be as interested in what I do as he is in that. So I was playing cornet and trumpet, and as I got into junior high, as the parts started to get higher, even though I practiced a lot and I started off first chair, first trumpet, but then as the parts got higher, I started slipping down in the section because I just couldn't do it physically. I couldn't play above a third space C. And luckily, my band director, Don Boucher, who changed my life, because he pulled me aside and said, I think you should play tuba. And so that afternoon, I get off the bus at home, dragging a sousaphone and a sousaphone chair and a Rubank Elementary book, because he said, here's the book, take it home, see if you can teach yourself how to play tuba. And so for 2 weeks I was in there, and I'm sure it sounded like whales mating, and it was just awful. And my parents were not happy. The trumpet soloist is now in there making these horrible sounds on a sousaphone. But that was seventh grade, and in ninth grade, I auditioned for the New York State All-State Band, and I was first chair tuba in the All-State Band, simply because I had a music educator who saw somebody that he thought could succeed in music, but I was on the wrong instrument. And that fork changed my life, because if I had stayed on trumpet, I would have gone lower, lower, lower in the section, and eventually dropped out.
Yeah, the fact that he cared and the fact that he took a chance having you do that makes all the difference in the world. And that's something that, we always talk about, assessing kids and intervening as quickly as possible. And what a great story that is. And first chair in the New York All-State Band is no small task, my friend, as you know.
Yeah, and the conductor was William Ravelli. And this was 1969, and this was when he was going around the country premiering Prague 68. And we played Prague 68, it might have been one of the first high school performances of Prague 68. Then the next year, I auditioned for the All-State Chorus and made the All-State Chorus. And the conductor was this guy named Howard Hansen. So that was a pretty good experience, you know. And then the next year, I auditioned for the All-State Orchestra, and I made it. And the conductor was this up-and-coming young guy named Michael Tilson Thomas. So needless to say, my All-State experiences were pretty extraordinary. I didn't know it at the time. I was just trying to play the parts, you know. But, you know, so junior high band, I transitioned to tuba. In high school, the band director was Tom Brown, another Willard Musser student, a very tough guy, very demanding. But I started playing valve trombone and tuba in the jazz band and kind of ignited my love of jazz. And he did something that also was a life-changing experience because, of course, that was the time of LPs. You know, we remember those, yeah.
Right.
And that was also when you could just tell kids to do things and they had to do them whether they wanted to or not. And so he assigned each one of us an album to buy by the next rehearsal. So, you know, you had to go downtown and go to a record store and buy it. And so all 60 of us in the high school band all bought the assigned album. And every week we were required to pass the album to our right, so that throughout the school year, you would have the chance to listen to 30 or 40 different albums. And probably a lot of the students didn't do it. I listened to every single one of them. When I first heard an orchestra playing Tchaikovsky, I thought I was going to pass out because it was so beautiful. I just didn't think that anything could be that gorgeous. I heard one of the albums was Thad Jones and Mel Lewis with Ruth Brown. And I loved it so much that I went at the end of the school year, I went to the person who had it and I said, "Hey, can I swap with you?" And he said, "Hey, you can just have it. I'm not listening to that." And so I still had that album. Fast forward decades, I'm now an associate bandmaster at the U.S. Army Band Pershing Zone. And I'm conducting the National Christmas Tree Lighting, and the soloist is Ruth Brown.
Wow.
And so I come out to her with this album that I've played the grooves off, and just said, you know, and here I am in all my finery and going, "Hey, Miss Brown, will you autograph my album?" You know. But you know, Tom Brown understood that, you know, that we needed to listen to things. You know, we need to be we need to be exposed to all kinds of different sounds if we were going to be the kind of band that we needed to be. And I don't know how many of the kids listened to him, but I did, and it made a big impact on me.
What a great assignment that would be for a teacher. I mean, what great vision he had to do that.
Yeah, and you know that years later, I just always assumed that there were great listening sources for kids, and I discovered there wasn't. So about 5-6 years ago, I was teaching at Blue Lake. And so I went to all the faculty members there and then also went to the Army Field Band and to their principals and said, "Tell me 5 people who you listen to." And because, you know, the people that are really, really the pros in the business don't necessarily listen to the names. You know, they know who's good.
Yes.
And so I built a page on my website called Sound Like This. For every instrument in the band and orchestra, there's 5 or 6 artists and it has a link to their webpage, but it has a link to 4 or 5 video clips. And I curated them. You know, kids are not going to look at a grainy black and white thing from the 50s. So these are all in HD. They're all well produced. They generally feature younger people. I made a very special effort to include women, to include people of color, so that kids of wherever they are can go and find someone who looks like them that's playing that instrument. And since putting that up there, and you know, I don't do anything to promote it, but ABA has helped promote it. as part of their digital thing. And that's really the only part of my website that's getting hit like hundreds of times a day, because teachers are now using it as, when kids were walking into their group trumpet class, they'll have Allison Balsam or something like that playing, just because, if a kid doesn't know what an instrument sounds like, they're just going to imitate the person sitting next to them. So,
exactly.
You hear a trombone player that sounds like the middle schooler sitting next to him and said, "You've never heard Joe Alessi, have you? Okay, let's play Joe Alessi as you're coming into the room today." And you don't want to sound like the music man doing the think method, but if you don't know what an instrument should sound like, you don't have a prayer.
That's exactly right. So what's your website, Tom, while we got you?
Oh, okay. It's pretty simple. ThomasPalmatier.com.
I got it. Beautiful. I'll publicize that when I do my notes for the podcast. That's great, man. So you had all these wonderful experiences, all state band, choir, orchestra.
Yep.
Coming up. Was it just the accumulation of all those things that said, I want to go into music, or was there a light bulb moment?
I think it was just an accumulation. My mom recalls that she took me to a concert by the Army Field Band when I was 11 or 12. And I said, "Gee, that'd be cool to do that." I don't remember it, but I certainly never thought I was going to command that band later on in life. But no, it just sort of happened that by the time I got into high school, that became my focus. I had been very lucky, again, a great school district, and I was in a program that was meant to, for those people who were put in this program, we completed all math and science requirements for graduation by the end of ninth grade, with the expectation that you would then take college STEM classes in 10th, 11th, and 12th grade. So I completed all those classes and used all those free hours in the schedule, much to the chagrin of the administration and the guidance counselor. Instead of taking these college math classes, I was taking band, chorus, orchestra, and music theory. So I was getting 4 class hours of music performance or theory 5 days a week for my 10th, 11th, 12th grade. So, it was kind of like I was going to Vandercook in high school.
That's fantastic. So you had this career in music in the military. Did you go to an academy when you graduated high school, or did you go off to college?
Oh, I went to college. I went to the Crane School of Music at State University of New York at Potsdam. Fantastic music ed school. I think maybe, Vandercook alums may disagree, but I think Crane is certainly one of the top music ed schools.
No question.
Yeah, and that is their focus. They've never, tried to pretend to be a conservatory, even though the level of musicianship is spectacular there. One of their graduates is a young lady named Renee Fleming. They graduate some pretty.
I heard she might make it someday.
Yeah, I think she might succeed. Yeah. Crane School of Music, got my music ed degree, and I did something you can't do nowadays. I graduated in 3 years.
Wow.
Yeah. So it was, and then I went to what is now Truman State University in Missouri.
Yeah, Kirksville, Missouri.
Yeah, as a graduate assistant. I taught tuba and euphonium. I directed a jazz band. I assisted with a brass choir. So I got my Master of Fine Arts in Music Ed there.
Who was the director then there, Tom?
That was Tom Duden. That was
Tom?
That was right before
Dan Peterson.
Yeah, Dan Peterson took over the year after I left.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Neat.
But I worked primarily for Dr. Roger Cody, who was the jazz band and brass choir director.
Yeah.
And so that was another great experience, because not only they treated the grad assistants like you were on the faculty. We attended faculty meetings. if you were smart, you didn't open your mouth, but we were allowed to attend. And so you kind of got to see what was going on, how the sausage was being made to a certain extent, and it was a place that encouraged you to do interesting things, because between my first and second year of grad school, I went and took an audition at the Coast Guard Band, and unlike most auditions that all of us take, where we come away going, geez, I wish I'd done this, I'd done that, I nailed this audition. I killed, and I finished second. So I went back to grad school, and because up until then I was studying with leading tuba players, and I thought, I'm going to be, I'm going to get a job. I'm going to be at Chicago or something like that, like every kid thinks they're going to. And after that, knowing that I had played my best, and I didn't win an audition, and I went back and I said, maybe my calling is to do is to try to direct groups or something like that. So I asked him if I could start a third jazz band. They had 2 jazz bands and they'd never had a third. And the school year had already started. So it was kind of, they said, well, if you can wrestle together enough people to register for it, we'll give you a line. And so I just and it was made up of, most of them were playing their secondary instruments. It was a real ragtag group, but by the end of the year, they were swinging. It was really a great experience. And they said, want to make it clear, we're not going to pay you anymore. But I was allowed to do that, and I was allowed to form low brass ensembles and things like that. Anything that I could convince some kid to be in a room with me. So I got to start learning how to coach groups and how to help other people play better.
And Northeast Missouri State, or Truman State as it's called now, I mean, that was a really terrific music program. I mean, their jazz band was like spectacular. They had one of the jazz festivals every year in the Midwest. Because I remember I competed at it when I was teaching in Kansas City, and that's great. That's a great program.
Roger Cody was a great jazz director, and I mean that jazz festival, he brought in big names every year, and I had Cat Anderson playing with my third band, and Eddie Daniels, and I was in all his jazz bands and did their first album playing bass, trombone, and tuba, and Roger really knew how to make a band sound good.
I remember the year that he had Carl Fontana as his soloist, the great trombone player. And of course, Carl Fontana always chewed gum when he played. And I remember the kids coming up and go like, Mr. Mangini, why is he chewing gum? And you won't let us chew gum.
If you can play like Carl Fontana, then I'll let you chew gum. Till then, nope.
Oh, God. And, as an aside, at Crane School of Music now, the director is Christopher Hughes.
Mm,
and Chris got his master's at Vandercook and got his doctorate at Colorado. So, that's a great program. So you got a great pedigree, man, all the way from high school and all the way through your military career. So why did you choose the military then?
Well, I had been working at a grad assistantship for $1,500 a year, and to be able to pay the rent, I was also washing dishes in the dining hall. So basically, I was tired of starving, and I just wanted a paycheck, and I wanted someday to be a music educator in schools, but I didn't feel like I had completely scratched the itch of being a performer yet. And my another part of it was my father served, like many others, served in the Army in World War II and served 3 years in combat. And I think, there's always a part of every one of us that hopes that someday we can, in some tiny way, measure up to our fathers or our parents. And so anyway, I joined the Army with no intent of staying. My intent was to get some money together and get the educational benefits so that I could again get my doctorate and become a college music teacher, and a year or two in, it just seemed like I liked it. I was playing a lot, both obviously playing in the Army, but I was gigging a lot because I was stationed in San Francisco. And it was just like, wow, I'm playing a lot of music and I'm getting paid to do it. Not getting paid well, but I'm getting paid. And it just, once again, I've never had this master plan or this roadmap or anything like that. Just during that first enlistment, the sergeant major, who seemed like he was 100 years old, said to me, he said, don't worry about your future. Don't worry about planning what's next. Don't worry about where you're going to sign next or if you're going to get promoted. Do the very best job that you can. And it's other people's job to take care of you. He said, it's my job to take care of getting you to the right place, getting you promoted. You just worry about doing your job. And if I could say that there was been one guiding thing throughout my entire career, and I think you will probably later on maybe go through quickly the steps, all the different jobs I had. I never, ever, ever went into a job thinking that it was just to punch a ticket and do something else. It was, this is the job I'm going to have for the rest of my life. And I just approached every job that way. And he was absolutely right. People took care of me. I didn't sit there and obsess about where I was going to get assigned next, or when I was going to get promoted, or if I was going to get this or that. Just do your job, and people will take care of you.
Staying in the moment.
Just do your job to the best you can. And I think we all have experienced the people that, when you meet them at Midwest and they're looking over your shoulder trying to find the next, a more important person to talk to.
Oh man.
And that's okay. You got to be your own advocate, I guess. But, I took his advice to heart. So, yeah.
That's great. So thinking back to when you first entered the military.
Right.
What was the first thing you learned?
My first sergeant used to constantly say, early is on time is late. And, and that actually kind of fit the way I was raised. Mm-hmm. And I'll give a quick story here. At the Crane School of Music, Elliot Del Borgo was the wind ensemble director. And I was a freshman, and they rehearsed once a week, and at 7 p.m. he would lock the door. And if there was an empty chair, that person would be replaced unless they had, were in a hospital somewhere. And so he locked the door, and this was a dress rehearsal before performing at Eastman Hall. So it's kind of like the Red Sox going to the Yankees. I mean, they're in upstate New York. For the Crane Wind Ensemble to play at Eastman Hall in the 70s or any time is a big deal.
Was Fennell there then?
I think that was probably Hunsberger. Yeah. So anyway, so a lot of us would hang around outside the door of wind ensemble rehearsal just to listen through the door. And I happened to have my horn with me. So anyway, the door clicks. A couple minutes later, Del Borgo walks out, and he's got this book that was prepared for him by the studio teachers ranking their players. That was super secret. And he says, Palmatier. And I go, do you mean Palmatier? He said, do you play tuba? Yes, sir. Do you have a tuxedo? Yes. He says, get in there. You're playing first chair. Wow. So as a freshman, because someone else wasn't on time and I was, and I hit a tux, I ended up the next day playing the concert at Eastman Hall. And I was never ever been the most talented, the most anything. But if you can outwork people, if you're always on time and you're prepared to the best of your ability, you're going to be a success.
That's great. I love this. This is awesome. Wow. Well, you had quite a journey in the military. I mean, you ended up being the leader and commander of the United States Army Band, Pershing's own. I mean, how long were you leader and commander of that group?
Just a couple of years, because it was near the end of my career, and we have mandatory retirements. I was asked to stay longer, and I declined the offer, not because I wasn't honored and just because I wanted to leave, but I just think that sometimes you just have to get out and let somebody else have their turn.
Sure.
So when it got to I at that point had been in the Army for over 37 years, and I was in my early 60s, and I said, I could probably hang on here for 2 or 3 years more, but that backs other people up in the line, and maybe it's just time to just go do something else. So it was just a couple of years there.
So you start in San Francisco,
right,
and you end up in Washington, D.C. Give me some of the highlights along the way in those 37 years.
Okay, I'll move very quickly through the litany of assignments, but then I'll stop at the ones that I think were memorable. So I went from San Francisco to the School of Music for advanced training, graduated a year and a half later as a warrant officer bandmaster, and at that time I was the youngest one that they had ever had. Went to command a band at Fort McClellan, Alabama. I feel so sorry for that band because I just didn't know what I was doing, but I was also I was so high energy, and again, the background that I had of Tom Brown, Tony Maiello, all these Ravelli, Musser acolytes. I mean, I was on fire. I was just, that's what I thought being a band director was. So you got this mid-20s commander in there with this group of adults, and he's just bouncing off walls. But they tolerated me, and I learned a lot. They taught me a lot. And it turned out to be a great band. I think they appreciated the energy. They would have preferred it to be a little modulated a little bit. But so I went from there to Panama, toured all throughout South and Central America. And it was there that I was offered the opportunity to convert to be a commissioned officer. So I took that direct commission. From there, went to San Antonio, and I was in charge of 35 Reserve and National Guard bands. Another great experience because I was traveling all throughout the country, meeting these citizen soldiers and learning at every step along the way. I was then brought to the Army Band as an associate director, directing the brass band, the herald trumpets, and the ceremonial band, and was there for 6 years. And of course, the number of the things that happen there are just off the charts. You're conducting at the White House. You're working on inaugural committees. So I remember that I was conducting the herald trumpets at the White House, and Mr. and Mrs. Reagan came out, and I almost fell over. So I was there through the Bush's Bush 41 and the Clinton administration. Great, amazing experiences. The very first job I was allowed to conduct at the Army Band was a thing in a convention center where we do a few marches and then the national anthem and that sort of thing. So I'm in the bathroom using the facilities, and the guy next to me starts talking to me, and I look over and it's Bob Dole, who at that time was the majority leader, and he's just kind of like, "Hey, how long you been in the Army?" "Yeah, I was in the Army too, but they shot me up." And of course, he was severely wounded in World War II.
Yes.
So that's when I cut. Okay, I'm not back in Alabama anymore. So then after that, I spent a time as the aide de camp to the commanding general of the military district of Washington. one of a couple of non-band assignments where I was exposed to the real big picture. And that exposure helped me immensely as a band commander, because too often band and orchestra directors, we get like this and we think that's the universe, and we don't understand why administrators don't appreciate. Well, we have to understand the big picture, and where do we fit in? What's our role in the big picture? And so I, there as a personal assistant to a very senior general, I'm sitting there in meetings in the tank as he's briefing the Joint Chiefs of Staff and seeing the really big picture. So then went down to command the Tradoc Band at Fort Monroe, and that was where the guidance to just focus on your job came into play, because I was told when I went there that I would be there for 2 years and not a day more, because they would want to move me out to make that available for somebody else. And if you're told you're only going to be in a job for 2 years, you don't necessarily go in and do the heavy lifting of trying to fix systems, starting work on a new facility that's not going to be built for 10 years. But I just ignored it and just said, this is the last job I'm ever going to have, and I'm just going to dig in. Well, as it turned out, the commanding general there, who's a 4-star, told the personnel people, he said, he can't leave until I leave. So I was there for over 4 years. And, the difference between you go into a job for 2 years and don't try to fix anything, you're just floating along and waiting for the next job. Or if you're going to be there for 4 years, if you didn't fix something in year 1, it's still broken in year 4, but you're paying the price for it now. Well, luckily, because that's what I had been told when I was a young private, just do your job. Other people will worry about it. And so I just treated that job like it was the last job I was ever going to have, and it worked out great. I then was sent to Fort Leavenworth, one of the few music officers to get sent to do a year studying at Command and General Staff College. And after that, back to Washington to be what's called the staff band officer. Essentially, I was the person on the Army staff overseeing all Army band activities worldwide. And again, a great place to kind of understand how everything fit together. That's where I was during 9/11. And of course, everybody's life changed a lot right then. And the general I was working for was in charge of casualty operations, specifically postal operations in the war zone. A lot of things connect. It went from being a very sleepy peacetime job to being at the eye of the hurricane in wartime. And the general that was killed in the Pentagon, Lieutenant General Tim Maud, she was like 2 clicks below him, which meant all of a sudden, at the time of the attack, she became the senior personnelist in the entire Army, because the number 2 guy was out of town, and it's like, hey, Tag, you're it. So she, after a few weeks of wartime operations, we're working around the clock, she pulled me in and said, I need you to do something besides bands, and instead of bands. And so she made me her executive officer, which at the time I was a major, and that was a lieutenant colonel position. And the executive officer is basically in charge of making sure that all the trains run on time. Let her focus on the big picture, make sure that everything gets done, make sure that everything that goes in front of her is right, and just make the whole operation run smoothly. So I did that, and then my next assignment was as commander of the U.S. Army Europe Band and Chorus, and I think that was probably the most interesting, most memorable assignment, because we were still in an active war, as we were for many years. But Europe was kind of the aircraft carrier that was pushing forces into Iraq and Afghanistan. And so that was, I had to keep my soldiers at a very, very high state of military readiness as well as musical readiness. And we were juggling 24-hour guard duty shifts, all kinds of non-musical things, while still trying to keep our abilities up to do that. And we worked hard. Took musicians into Iraq several times. Was part of the planning of if the U.S. had sent forces into Iraq from the north through Turkey, what they had done. See, I had graduated from Command and General Staff College and was also at that time working to be a graduate of the Army War College. And one Christmas at the beginning of the war, as soon as I had gotten there, they said, cancel, all you and a bunch of other people are going to be locked up in this secure facility for a week or two, and you're going to write the war plans for how to invade Iraq from the north, if Turkey gave permission to go through that way. So that's what I did for 10 days, along with a bunch of other majors and lieutenant colonels and colonels. We developed very, very detailed plans on how we were going to get 3 or 4 divisions going through from Germany into Turkey, from Turkey into Iraq. Obviously, it's not classified now, or I wouldn't be talking about it. At the time, those were highly classified plans. That was, to me, the time where I got to fully experience the synthesis of being a soldier and being a musician. Where you saw, and I was blessed that the commanding general was a big thinker who understood the power of music. So, which was why that was one of his priorities, that we took music groups into Iraq to perform for soldiers there. He pushed it, and it was during a very active combat phase. I mean, there was a lot of incoming fire going on, but he understood the power of it. He understood the power of a foreign leader coming to visit him and having me plan the after dinner entertainment to be very finely tuned to the strategic objective. And it was an incredible experience to be, and prepared me greatly for the field band and the Army band to be able to be kind of at the elbow of a 4-star big time strategic thinker, and in a war zone, and to be able to, he would kind of let me into his thought patterns, so that when it came time to develop the entertainment program, he would say, you need to understand the context before you start picking out tunes. And he understood that. And there's not many people that understand that. Throughout my career, I would have, a general would say, I want a concert here. And then 14 staffers between you and him come up with a concert list that made no sense at all. And then you're having to fight all the way up the chain of command going, that's kind of my job. But could you please tell me what the purpose of this concert is? So, and that's why when I talk with band directors, so, before you start picking out tunes, ask yourself the question, why am I doing this concert? Are you doing it just because you've always done a spring concert? Okay, that's fine. But what's the real reason? This is essentially their final exam for that learning period. You are also doing it to demonstrate to the parents and the community the excellence of our school. Here's what your students are, but make sure you can answer those questions, because if somebody comes in and says, we need the auditorium that night, your concert's going to be canceled. you need to be able to answer why this concert is important. It's our final exam. So sorry, that was a long. So so the band and chorus there in Europe, I was all over Europe, to include Russia, Belarus, Ukraine, all the countries that we read about in the news now, was in all of those, in and out of Iraq. After that, went to the School of Music, and at that time, it was the Army element of the Navy School of Music. And that had worked for a lot of years. The Navy has been the host, but the needs of a wartime Army and the needs of the Army music program had deviated greatly from what the Navy needed. They essentially, their bands are never called upon to be in a combat zone. And so consequently, I was getting directives from our training command of, they need to carry rifles all the time. And, these are things that we expect them to do so that when they graduate from there, they are ready to go into a combat zone with a band and be fully trained musicians and soldiers. And so upon my arrival there, with the approval of my bosses, I had to inform them that we are now going to be the Army School of Music and be a separate entity, training our soldiers separately than you. And over the years, it has turned out to be, the vision was that we would still stay geographically with them, share space, and it's worked out great. Each of the services now gets to train the way they want to without having to, fight and compromise with the other, but they share a beautiful facility, they share instruments, they share music, they share staff, because there's Navy, Marines, and Army there. Well, you don't need 3 oboe instructors. Right. So anyway, so that was, I essentially became the founding dean of the Army School of Music for a few years, then was moved to the Army Field Band, an amazing experience because that's the touring band of the U.S. Army. We would go on 3 major tours per year. So you'd rehearse for 4 to 6 weeks, put together 4 or 5 programs that would go into a rotation. You go on the road for 40 days. So for 40 days straight, you're doing one-nighters. And then you get in the bus and do it again. Then you get in the bus and do it again. But for someone who really is a musician and who treasures performing, going out 40 nights in a row to a full house and playing with one of the best bands in the world, that's heaven.
Hey, let me interrupt you here a second. We'll get it back on track. But when you were at the School of Music, was there a guy by the name of Dwayne Whittam there, a Navy?
Oh, yes. Yeah, Dwayne might not have been at the school then, but I've certainly crossed paths with Dwayne many times. Yeah,
because he was a Navy man.
Yeah.
He was in my high school band.
Yeah, Dwayne is a great guy. He ended up being their program head, and having he's a great musician and a really, really smart guy.
Yeah, he's a good kid.
Yeah.
He had the worst embouchure of any trumpet player I've ever had in my entire life, but he had the greatest attitude. I love that kid, man. He's a man now. I mean, my gosh.
Yeah. Well, he's retired now from.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
So when you work with musicians of, say, Pershing Zone or the Army Field Band, what do they expect from you? What kind of leadership are they looking for from the podium?
They expect mutual respect. They are a very, it's kind of part of the expectation. They are not, a sergeant there is not going to be disrespectful to a colonel on the podium. But they expect to be respected as well. And that was easy for me to do. But from time to time, we would have guest conductors in who would want to kind of exert their dominance and, and act condescending. And boy, as soon as they sense condescension or disrespect, the lights go off. They just kind of go, nope, don't
Wow.
Not going to have that. Because, anyway, number one, they expect to be respected, not coddled, not catered to, but don't talk down to me. Don't berate me. I'm doing my best to assume that. They expect you to be prepared, obviously. Now, like any musician, any high-level musician, I mean, I don't care if it's Dudamel or Bernstein or anything, I guarantee that the musicians in the orchestra complain about their conductor. So, but they expect you to be prepared. And so there were a number of occasions where I would be in the middle of a piece and I would encounter something that what I was doing with my hands just wasn't effective. And I would just say, let's skip that for now. I'll put in some time on that tonight and it'll be fixed tomorrow. I'm not gonna have you sitting here while I practice.
Right.
And I think that they respected that I appreciated that they come to rehearsal prepared, I come to rehearsal prepared. And if I need to do some woodshedding, same as them. If they need to do woodshedding, do your woodshedding tonight. Don't do it here in rehearsal. And the same applied to me. So I think they just wanted to be treated like fellow professionals.
Yeah. So we hear the word collaboration from a lot of conductors, and especially, you get in the collegiate levels, they talk about you have to collaborate with your musicians, get their thoughts, feelings about interpretation and tempo and style. Now, be honest, how much of that went on in the band?
That definitely depends upon the conductor. Everybody's got their own style. I remember the very, very first rehearsal with Pershing Zone. And, there's not just one way to play anything. And I remember asking the band, I said, well, this section here, we can do either this or this. What do you think? And it was crickets. I got nothing, no response, nothing. Because it's my first day with them. And they, you got to build up some trust. And they were taken a little bit by surprise. So I next rehearsal did the same thing, asked them their opinion a couple times, got no response. About the third rehearsal, the solo trumpet player, he understood what I was trying to do, that I really did want their opinions. And so I asked him, and he raised his hand and he said, well, I think it ought to be like this, this, and this. And he said, and then there was this pause. And he said, and while we're at it, the way you did this thing back here, I don't think that works. And there was this silence in the room of okay. And I said, okay, we're going to try it that way. And then we're going to go back and take a relook at what you just pointed out. Let's try a different way. And from that point on, it became almost kind of if I asked their opinion, I would get an opinion, usually from one of the principals, but it didn't have to be. And it didn't turn into like a big argument with 60 people's opinions, but generally they almost always agreed on what they wanted to have. I would constantly ask them, if you've got your choice between conducting in 2 or 4 or something like that. And I said, well, what works best for you? And they would always opt on the side, we want as few beats as possible.
And that you're elevated by doing that elevated your status in their eyes. I mean, teachers don't understand that when you're able to engage those students, all of a sudden you elevate yourself as well.
Well, I mean, it's when I go out and do clinics, I always say, what is the only thing in this room that doesn't make music? And I'll hold up the baton. and I'll often talk with directors and bands about how, in my opinion, well, not so much with Pershing Zone because they would come prepared, but with a student group, you start off with the director being, I would say, 99% responsible and in charge. The director comes in knowing what they want. The students are just learning. As you progress and get closer and closer to, if you've done your job right, by the time you get to the concert, the conductor has become just another part of the ensemble that they will rely on at points when they need it, but they have taken over the music making.
That's good. That's good. So you retired a couple years ago.
Yep.
How was it making that adjustment from military life to civilian life? How long did that take you to kind of really wrap your arms around it?
Well, I was warned by a colleague before I retired, and he said, about 6 months after retirement, you're going to hit a wall of depression. And he was right. And I teach a session for directors who are transitioning now to warn them about that, because it doesn't matter. It's almost like you can set a clock by it, because you have just to put it into perspective, I was the senior director of music in the armed forces. Now, obviously, that did not mean that the other bands worked for me, the other services, but it did mean that when DOD or Congress or the press wanted something from about military music, I was the guy that got the midnight call and was expected to come up with the answer. So it was not unusual for me to get 600 or 700 emails a day. And they weren't spam. They were 600 or 700 emails that had to be read. And the day I retired, of course, I handed over my military phone and account and everything. And I checked my brand new Gmail account, and there was nothing there. And your name's off. Your name's not on the building anymore. You go from being here to just being another retired guy. And so I say the secret to it is deciding what's your new identity going to be. And so I just said, I'm going to dive headfirst into not being a retired colonel. I'm going to go headfirst into being a music educator, back to what I started out to be, and had remained all those years. But still, there is a time where you've got to, you have lost your identity, and it takes time to build up your new identity and your new self-esteem and that new identity. And it's not going to come out exactly the way you thought it would. It's going to evolve just like your first career did. So it's been good, but it's not seamless.
Right. But you're having fun. You're having a good time doing it.
Most of the time, yeah.
Well, as if you didn't have enough things in your transition, recently you were named editor of School Band and Orchestra magazine. Congratulations for that, by the way. And your publisher, Mike Lawson, was a guest on an earlier podcast. And I remember when I sent you the email, and he copied Mike on it. He told you to watch out if you agreed to come on my podcast, because I was going to ask you some tough questions, but hopefully so far they've been okay, haven't they?
Well, I have done press conferences in places like Russia and China and Belarus. So the first question I was asked in a press conference in Belarus was, why do you hate us? So your questions have been easier to answer than that.
I try to throw softballs.
Yeah.
Those alley-oops, so you can just slam dunk it.
Yeah.
That's great. So what's the value in having a magazine like School Band and Orchestra, Tom?
Well, I first stumbled on SBO, I don't know, maybe 15, 20 years ago. I don't know exactly when. I was in a band room waiting to work with the band, and I was just kind of looking around, and there was this magazine sitting there, and I started leafing through it, and it's full color, and it's got, and I said, oh, this looks like an interesting article. And I just said, there's all kinds of niches in our profession. There's, the Journal of Band Research, and then there's the instrumentalist, and then there's this and that. But I think SBO has a very, very unique niche in the industry by presenting a wide variety of topics, because there's the days of just you're a band director and you walk in and you do Frank Erickson today, and tomorrow you're doing this. Those days are gone. most band directors and orchestra directors are doing both. Oftentimes they're expected to also be the drama teacher and to teach chorus and to teach general music and to coach a sports team. And, so you can't just pigeonhole and say, we're only going to talk about band and orchestra stuff. We have to talk about we have to share with them things on how to be a better teacher of anything, how to survive as a person. I mean, the April issue kind of focused on the health and welfare. I mean, how do you avoid burnout? But at the same time, put it in a package that a busy, not just band directors, because, SBO sends hard copies to a dozen hard copies to every school that they are subscribed. And so I see them laying around band and orchestra rooms. So kids pick them up and will read through them. And, it's full of just useful nuggets, and they're in bite-sized chunks that a busy person can read a two-page article and get the gist of it. And if they want more, they can go find more. But how many times have you gotten one of the publications and you see the 12-page analysis of the third movement from Lincolnshire Posey? Okay, number one, do we need another one of those? But two, am I going to sit there and slug through a 12-page article? Well, maybe sometimes, but not often. And that band and orchestra director who's in the middle of marching band season is definitely not going to do it. But if there's an article there that says, hey, here's a couple tips on how to improve your retention, and it's in one page. So
like a 10-page article on selecting the correct bass drum mallet to hit beat 4 in the third measure of Holt's suite movement 3, that probably wouldn't be a good article then.
No, that's we've got to meet our readers where they are, not where we or not where a university thinks they should be. We got to meet them where they are and help them where they are.
So when they read the magazine, you want them to come away with?
Here's what I want them to come away with something useful, something that makes them say, oh, I'm going to try that. I'm going to be a better teacher. One of the new things I just started with this new issue is not new music reviews, it's great music reviews of 0.5 to grade 3. And say, don't worry about it being new. Have it be one of your go-to pieces that when a colleague says, hey man, I need something really good for my middle school band, what should I use? So the first one, it's Shenandoah Triptych by Brian Balmages, published in 2002.
Geez, Brian must have been at Miami then.
Yeah, so it's a teacher who says, I use this every 3 years because it's a great teaching. And she said, this is what it teaches, and it's like one paragraph. And so I want to share those kind of things as opposed to new music reviewers are good, but other people do that.
Yeah, and there's so many composers and arrangers out there that the younger generation, they don't know. They don't know who Claire Grunman is. They don't know who Paul Yoder was. They don't know, there's so many they don't know.
Yeah, I mean, so if I end up without somebody to write one, I'm going to write one on Balladeer.
Oh, great piece. Frank Erickson.
Yeah.
Yep. That's cool. That's wonderful. Well, another really neat feature of the magazine is the annual 50 directors issue. And I hope that you'll continue to do that. That's one of my favorites because it spotlights those teachers who are in the trenches making a difference.
Yep.
I hope you're going to continue that.
Absolutely. And what I'm looking at, and that will be in our December issue, like usual. I've always nominated somebody for that. And it's great then reading about them, later on. And that issue, one of the subtopics of that is going to be mid-course adjustments. You go into the school year with a plan for the whole year. But, it's probably a good idea during that winter break to kind of go, okay, this worked, this didn't work. Oh, by the way, we had a global pandemic, let's maybe I need to tweak my plan a little bit going forward. So what I'm hoping to do is ask a couple of those 50 directors, just tell me what you do at mid-year to kind of tweak your plan going forward.
That's wonderful. So where do you see the future of school bands and orchestra headed?
Well, I don't think it's all gloom and doom. And in the April issue, Bob Morrison wrote an article about basically debunking the myth that arts education as a career is a dead end. He showed that it has almost 100% employment rate. And in fact, our biggest looming crisis is a shortage of music educators.
Mm-hmm.
And here's where I wrote a couple articles for SBO a couple of years ago that were titled, "Is Higher Education Doing What's Best for Music Education?" And I believe that we will continue to have a shortage of not just numbers of music educators, but great music educators, unless and until the institutes of higher education change their focus. At this time, according to stats that I was able to get with the help of NASM, National Association of Schools of Music, there probably are more performance majors than there are music ed majors.
Mm-hmm.
Well, obviously there's no jobs for them. You could fill all the high-level performing jobs out of Curtis and Juilliard every year and still have some left over. So what are these, particularly the publicly funded institutions, doing, emphasizing performance majors? Now, you put yourself in the shoes, as all of us were at one time, of an 18-year-old walking in the door. You now don't live with mom and dad anymore, but your new mom and dad are your studio teacher and your ensemble director. They are the centers of your universe. And they sit you down and go and say, "You're too talented to be a music ed major."
Yep.
When in fact, the harsh truth for most of the time is that it is of benefit to the ensemble director and the studio teacher to have you be a performance major. It makes their job easier. I remember going into tuba lessons with my lower lip bleeding from having spent so many hours playing clarinet. So I couldn't play tuba. And my teacher just had to deal with it, Whereas if you're a performance major, your soul belongs to that ensemble director and that studio teacher. They have you have no other distractions. And so consequently, I believe that we are selling a false bill of goods to thousands and thousands and thousands of young musicians, leading them to believe that they have a career as performers in the future. Now, the impact on music education then is even worse than just the raw numbers of most of the music degrees graduating without certification. The impact on music education, in my opinion, and I've seen it in action, is that if we take a hypothetical class of incoming 100 freshman music majors, and we take the top 50% of them in terms of their musical ability, and we say, "You're over here." We go to the bottom 50% and say, "You're now going to be the music educators of the future." But in many universities, that bottom 50% will only study with the grad students. They won't study with the premier instructors. In many cases, at some of the larger institutions, they are not allowed to attend master classes. They're not allowed to be, and they won't play in the top ensembles. Because how many times do we go to Midwest and see a collegiate ensemble and you look at the thing and it's 7/8 graduate students. So, that undergraduate music education major isn't getting within sniffing distance of the top ensembles, which means they're playing in the third and fourth ensemble under maybe a grad assistant, maybe a teaching assistant. So it's just, and so consequently, they don't get exposed to what I got exposed to at Crane School of Music, with Elliot Del Borgo on the podium every day, with Robert Washburn sitting in the audience coaching us on how to perform his work, with Michael Tilson Thomas, Howard Hanson, Bill Ravelli. If you are a music education student in a lot of schools that don't emphasize music ed, you don't get exposed to those people. You don't get to perform music at a high level. And so we have a lot of music educators out there who are fantastic people, great pedagogues, but they themselves have never made music at a high level. And so consequently, we then go and we listen to their performances and go, how could you not let that retard breathe? And well, they've never experienced it. They never had a director who did it. They're great people. But they were never ever exposed, when in fact we should be with the understanding that there's always going to be that one or two that, okay, you could make it as a performer, generally at some of the bigger schools, but we should be saying to this top 60% or so, you're going to be great music educators, musical artists, musical performers, the whole 9 yards. You're going to be musical entrepreneurs, and you're going to be given the tools to be an educator. And for that, I don't want to, it sounds harsh to say the bottom 30% or something like that. We say to them, you love music, you should get a liberal arts degree and get a BA in music. But if you are really barely playing at a high school level when you're in college, what leads us to believe that you're going to become this unbelievable music educator in 4 years?
Yeah.
So that was a really, so I am hopeful that the ecosystem will start to adjust, that school band and orchestra directors will coach their parents to, when their son or daughter is told they should be a performance major, they should ask that school, please give me a list of the people who have graduated from your institution who are currently making a full-time living performing music. Give me a list. And if there's no names on that list, then now tell me what makes my son or daughter so extraordinary that they're going to buck a decades-long record of failure.
Right. But I think, and your point is so right on. And I think to that, I think cultivating that next generation of music teachers can't start when they get to college.
No.
Those teachers in middle school and in high school have to start giving their students opportunities to get a taste of it. I remember a few months ago, it was about a year ago, my first junior high school band director, who was suffering from Parkinson's disease, a brilliant man, a great musician. And I was home in Michigan at the golf course, and he and his wife were there. And he had a hunch that I was going to be there for some reason that night. And he saw me and he called me over, and he's shaking his hand, and he pulls out this program, this piece of paper from his coat pocket. And he said, I saw this the other day and I was hoping I would run into you. And he hands it to me. It was my first seventh grade band concert program.
Mm.
And he had arranged the Notre Dame Victory March, and I was the guest student conductor for it.
Mm.
And I just started weeping like a baby.
Yeah.
But it was those kinds of experiences, I'm sure, that said, man, I want to do this. That sound coming at me. I'm making music, waving my arms, not knowing what the hell I was doing. Right. But so we've got to plant those seeds at some point.
Yep. So anyway, I will never be one of the gloom and doom crowd when it comes to music, because it has a way of, music itself has a way of overcoming people and our shortcomings. So I think we're in the right business, if you will. But I do wish that more of the more of the academic leaders in our profession valued music education more highly.
Then we got work to do, don't we, Tom?
Yeah. One of your questions here was how I would like people who are writing for SBO to write. And recently I was invited to go up and spend a week with a fantastic high school, middle school band program. And they just had kind of cold called me. It wasn't somebody I knew or anything. And so I was up there and I asked the director, I said, so how I'm appreciative of the invitation, but how did you decide to invite me? And he said, well, I've been reading SBO magazine for 3 or 4 years, and every one of your columns, I felt like you were writing to me. And so that's what I hope our columnists, and many of they do, I encourage them, just talk from one music geek to another, and don't try to dress it up in academic ease, and you don't need to use buzzwords. Just talk to a trusted colleague and share your good thoughts. And I think that's the tone that SBO has had over the years, and that I hope to continue.
That was a great compliment for you. And Tom, I can't thank you enough for being on the podcast with me. I know the listeners are going to really enjoy it, and I can't wait till the next time I get a chance to see you in person so I can thank you.
Likewise, John. Great to see you.
Take care of yourself.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Okay. Bye-bye. Colonel Tom Palmatier is correct. There is a shortage of great music teachers. We all know that if you do it right, it's a very taxing profession, but it's one that brings with it an abundance of satisfaction, regardless of the age and experience levels of the students. And to those of you listening, and especially those of you listening who are also music teachers, we can do something about it. First and foremost, let's stop talking bad about our profession. Teachers don't need to bash the teaching profession. In all the visits I've made to doctors and dentists over the years, I never once heard them bash the medical profession. And I can assure you, there is a lot more pressure on a doctor than there is on a band director. Second, give your students the opportunity to help. Maybe it's a one-on-one with a younger or weaker student, maybe the ability to guest conduct the band, maybe to serve as a section leader or even a drum major. Many of our best students want to go into the performance side because that's all they know. Since they started playing their instrument, all they have done is perform. Getting students interested in being on the other side of the podium at an early age, in my humble opinion, can help to increase the number of musicians who want to enter the teaching and band directing field and be just like you. I know Colonel Palmatier's work with School Band and Orchestra magazine is going to be a great contribution to the profession. He has the experience, the knowledge, and the desire to help make a difference. And I know that is exactly what he's going to do. Well, that's Band Talk with Charlie Mangini and friends. Thanks for listening to the program, and please Tell your friends and colleagues about Band Talk with Charlie Mangini and Friends, available on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen to your favorite podcast. So until the next time, this is Charlie Mangini saying, thanks for listening.
Thanks for listening to Band Talk with Charlie Mangini and Friends. If you would like to send a question to Charlie or have a comment, please send an email to bandtalkcharlie@gmail.com. We hope you will let your colleagues, students, and friends know about Band Talk with Charlie Mangini and Friends. Thanks for joining us, and we look forward to being with you again soon.